welcome back into episode 12 of the Canadian Fast Break. And although the CEBL season has wrapped up here, we're just kind of getting started with a few fun episodes to kind of round out the season. And this one is going to be an amazing one, so stay tuned. But before I kind of announce the big guest, we're going to be kind of going through the CEBL Awards here. I know we kind of did that a little bit on the National Rundown, but now we have Jeremy. We're going to kind of banter back and forth, see what he thinks, see if me and Gianno agree and whatnot, and we'll go from there. But then later on in the episode, we're going to have Joey Slattery joining us here today, a very special guest. He is, of course, one of the big voices of the Winnipeg Sea Bears. He is a sideline reporter for CBC doing the CEBL, and he also is the host of Target Score Winnipeg. So, he's a man of many talents. He wears a lot of hats, and we're super excited to hear what he has to say about the Sea Bears, the CEBL as a whole, and everything from this season. So stay tuned for that. He'll be joining us in just a little bit, but let's start it off here. Jeremy, I know it's exciting to kind of talk to you first about all these awards because we've yet to do that. So let's start at kind of the biggest, reaction from around the world, around the fans, around the league, just everything. The MVP. There was a lot of questions surrounding that. So start there, give us your initial thoughts, and just give us a nice check-in.
Well, I remember seeing the nominees getting posted, right? And all of a sudden, it's two standout players. It's so hard to pick between two individuals that are, consistently growing the league. And Powell stepped into that role this season, I think, in an excellent way as well. So yeah, two standout individuals, but it was so hard for me to even give like a prediction on where this thing was headed, right? And we woke up that morning and we saw that Powell was able to get that achievement under his belt. So big congrats to him, of course. And now that comes with, that division that we saw online as well too.
Yeah.
It was a little bit talking about Teddy Allen and his individual effort with Myles Powell and his whole team collective arrangement. And I think we have a good argument here, you guys. And I definitely want to hear your takes as well, too. Yeah. But the biggest thing for me was you see Teddy Allen, have that individual effort. You know that he's a player that stands out, single point season record and in a game as well, too. So I think we definitely have something going really well for Teddy Allen. Again, not an individual you can just turn a blind eye to. But then Myles Powell on the other end this season, averaging 22.9 points, 3.3 rebounds, 4.5 assists across 21 games, and a league best tying 3.8 three-pointer per game. So he's definitely another contributing player. He had the most success, I would say, in Scarborough this season and leading the team in doing so. So I can't turn away and say that Powell's was undeserving, I think we all maybe expected Teddy Allen to kind of steal the title there, but Powell walked away with the belt, and honestly, good for him, right? I think he earned it. He earned it. That's the easiest way to say it, right? And also, I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, especially with the clutch player of the year, but those 9 target score time winners were impeccable to choosing who was going to win this.
Yeah, well, here was my thing, right? Like, looking through the awards, as I was kind of scrolling through, I saw the clutch player of the year first, and I saw it was Myles Powell, and I was prepared. I'm like, okay, perfectly. They gave it to him. I think that was deserved, and then they were going to give Teddy the MVP. And I keep going, and I see Teddy was not the MVP, and it was Myles, and that really shocked me. But, the biggest thing that I kind of look at here was, the statistical margins, and field goal percentage. Myles shot only 38% from the field, and I think that was one of the biggest points that was brought up. And then Teddy obviously shooting 45, and he scored over 200, or not over, but about 200 more points than Myles in this season. So those are kind of the big takeaways for me here. But I'll send it to you, Gianno, and kind of give us more of an update. I know you've maybe had a little bit more time to settle with your thoughts, but what are you kind of thinking there?
I stand by my original assessment, and that's that I think Teddy kind of got robbed. I just think, I don't know, I think for me, like, winning the scoring title really means something, and, like, beating that record just really felt like a really good accomplishment. And something, again, when you're thinking about building a campaign, I'm like, that's a really, really good cornerstone. And, like, I understand being the star guy on a 20-win team, that's going to get you really, really far too. But again, I think that's a team effort, right? I think the Teddy Allen show was really what carried Winnipeg for this entire stretch. And until, he wasn't there and Xavier Moon had to pick it up. But Man, I don't know. We broke it down a lot on the national rundown, and I think I probably spent like 10, 15 minutes, proving my point to Brady about what I thought on all those things. If you want to get the full unfiltered thoughts, obviously go check those out. But man, that was really I don't know. I still feel like Teddy just kind of got robbed. Like, we went over it. Like, the big part of what I talked about on the national rundown was just the amount of things that had to go right for Teddy to get that single season scoring record at the pace he did, right? Shawnee's got it last year, and I mean, man, he beat this thing with like 4 or 5 games to go. And that's something you're probably not going to see for a very long time. Like, we're talking about, again, a single season points record probably getting to the point of it may not get touched for 3-4 years, probably at the very least now. Being able to average 27, 29 points a game and doing that for 24 games on a team that, again, you have to be able to consistently produce. They're not resting you, right, because you're in a playoff race. You didn't get called out to the summer league. You got there right on time for camp. It's a really tough thing that I can't imagine somebody's going to be able to come in here and do it next year. And if it is, it's going to be somebody really different. So that's where I was kind of at. I'm like, you think about the season he just put up and what it's going to mean for the record books. Like, I don't know. It's an individual award, and that's my point. I'm like, Scarborough felt more like a team effort, and I think the award certainly kind of agreed with them. But I felt like, again, MVP is an individual player award. Who's the most valuable player? We could go back and forth on this debate about MVP versus best player in the league, and I think there is a difference. But nonetheless, I feel like Teddy's still really. I felt like it was kind of a slam dunk for him, but I can see why people go with Myles Powell too.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to see what Joey has to say kind of in regards to that. I think that'll be super interesting. But before we kind of get to him, let's go through the rest of these awards. Jeremy, I want to know which one of these stood out to you the most. I'll kind of list them off just so everybody's aware if they're not already. But obviously, Tyree Samuel got the Canadian Player of the Year nod. Tyrell Vernon of the Scarborough Shooting Stars Coach of the Year. Easton Tim, Developmental Player. Myles Powell, Clutch Player, as we mentioned. Sixth Man went to Frank Mitchell. And then Defensive Player to Kellen Tyne. So out of those, was there any that really stuck out to you as maybe the most deserving, or maybe somebody that should have won it that maybe shouldn't have?
Yeah, I'll say 2 here just to spread the love, I guess. The Clutch Player of the Year, of course, Powell. I mentioned those 9 target score time winners. That is a sole reason on why they had this dominating 20-win record on the season, right? And you can attribute that to Powell, but also I guess another award that stood out to me was Canadian Player of the Year, right? We had Tyree Samuel, and I think he was excellent. He was deserving of it as well too. And I was kind of thinking back to maybe individuals who didn't even get on the nominee list, you guys, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, and I don't know if we spoke about it last episode, but in the back of my mind, something was telling me about Simon Hildebrandt, and I think it was picture perfect on the way that he finished the season, the way he finished the championships. He was the one who sealed the deal, local player. And I don't know if that credits him to, getting Canadian Player of the Year, but nonetheless, maybe of the postseason. And I don't know. I think there's some slight argument there that you could kind of sliver him into the conversation for sure. But big congrats to Tyree Samuel, of course, stepping into that big role this season with the Bandits. We didn't know maybe who that player was going to be early on this season for them, and he did an excellent job filling them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you bring up a point that we kind of talked about on the National Rundown with Simon Hildebrandt, and there was kind of a lot of people that I think maybe agreed with you because he didn't even get, like, a Canadian team recognition. So, Gianno, do you maybe have any thoughts there? I know we talked about it briefly, but just go back and forth there with Jeremy.
Yeah, I think the first thing that kind of came to my mind, Jeremy, when you kind of thought about the Player of the Year, I think honestly we should have, like, how the CFL has like an MOC like for the playoffs / Grey Cup. I honestly wonder if maybe that should be a thing. If there's a most like a Canadian player of the playoffs, that might be really cool. Just because you do have the ratio where you have to have Canadian players be there. Obviously, I think that would be something the league has to implement and decide, is it something that's worthwhile? But nonetheless, very, very cool idea. I really, really like that. I just came up with that when you said that. Definitely some good thoughts for the league there for next year. But yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at too. Like he probably deserved. I think there should also be an all Canadian second team. To be honest with you, I feel like we can probably make that. and just kind of see where things are at. Although I do understand maybe that would almost encompass majority of the Canadian players. I could see that, but I do think Simon Hildebrand probably was he was the late bloomer of the season. Where like when he was at the beginning, again, I don't really think I was pinpointing him to be like the guy who's going to be that pivotal person in the playoffs for them and really a clutch player for them, even in the finals. I don't know if I would have necessarily said that. I think he was just kind of somebody that continually got better through the season. Is probably the biggest riser from the beginning of the season to the end. And maybe next year that means he's probably going to be a lock for all Canada first team if he does decide to come back. But I think that's the biggest takeaway. It's just I think there was other guys that came in a little bit more established and they played a little bit more longer in the CBL. I was going to say the CFL. CFL's on the mind today, but nonetheless, yeah, it felt like a lot of the CBL players that were on there was just more established guys who'd been there, and Hildebrand probably just made his mark a little bit too late to be able to be a really, really big contender. But I think that changes next year. If he comes back, man, look out! Especially if he goes back to Winnipeg, that team would be outstanding.
Yeah, he's only going to develop like crazy more, right? Going over to, I think he's playing Germany. Late bloomer you said, but his impact. I think there absolutely should be some sort of nod. I like what you bring up there. There should be some sort of nod for Canadian players in the playoffs, and there's usually always someone Canadian that's going to step up in that time. So that would be great, and I think he would have easily got that award this year. But last thing before we send it over to. And we bring over Joey onto the podcast. Let's go over the first team and second team, Jeremy, and we'll see if you have any maybe snubs or swaps here. First team, Myles Powell, Teddy Allen, Javonte Smart, Sean East, and Tyrese Samuel. And then the second team, TDM, Khalil Ahmad, Frank Mitchell, Nick Hornsby, and Matthew Cleveland. And then the all-Canadian team as well, as we kind of mentioned, Tyrese Samuel, Frank Mitchell, Quincy Guerriere, Sean Miller-Moore, and Jaden Bediako. So anything there kind of standing out to you? Any snubs, any swaps?
Yeah, it's interesting. Before we jump away from the topic, I guess I'll say I'd love to see Simon Hildebrand somewhere there on that all-Canadian team. Maybe it's a matter of fact that if it's a stat thing that, he's not filling in. But I think, again, like we alluded to, he was excellent in his progression throughout the season, so I think he definitely deserves to have his name on the list somewhere there. But I don't know. I think every single league does their first and second team maybe a little bit different. I know that some leagues have a tendency to balance out both teams, to maybe have your first standout player like your A1 and then your A2 on your second team, just so it's more rounded out. So I'm not too sure about the CBL's ruling when it comes to that, but at the end of the day, I think that it is a pretty fair first and second team. Like Teddy Allen, Myles Powell, those guys are going to be on my first team without a doubt. One player that I kind of would like to see on there, maybe, I know it was a late addition to the team, but just considering how far he's went, you see Sean East. But what about Trenton Flowers? I don't think that you can rule him out, but I do think it's the fact that he joined in a little bit later. Maybe we see him with a full season with the Honey Badgers next season, and this conversation is something different, right? We see his name on that list. But yeah, second team as well. TDM, love to see him there with Khalil Ahmad. Frank Mitchell, excellent choice. Hornsby, another one as well, too. And then, I just think it's well-rounded. I think everyone who you think of the CEBL, those faces are on those lists. And I don't know. I don't think that there's anyone that got snubbed from these teams, but I would love to see Trenton Flowers and Simon Hildebrand maybe climb into this role next season.
Yeah, those are great names. I like that you bring that up. I think for me, and me and Gianna talked about this, I think we agreed that it was pretty correct, and I don't think they missed on too much. I mentioned that I would have loved to somehow see TDM on that first team, but it's so stacked in that sense that it's like I don't think there's a way to fit him, unfortunately. But yeah, it's so many big names and so many guys stepped up this season, and it was great basketball. So I think it's a perfect time to now send it over to our guest Joey Slattery and see what he has in store. So we will send it there now. All right, as I just mentioned, we are now joined by Joey Slattery. Very exciting stuff to have him here on the podcast. Of course, he is the voice of Target Score Winnipeg and the CBL on CBC/TSN sideline reporter. He wears so many hats, like I said, does so many things. Super exciting to have you here. Joey, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm good, man. I'm just as excited to be on this podcast. I really appreciate the work that you guys do out there in covering this league. And as soon as I got the invitation. I was like, for sure I'll be on the show. So thanks for making the time for me.
Oh, yeah, it's amazing stuff. And we're super excited here to discuss some CBL and those Winnipeg Sea Bears. So, honestly, let's dive right into it. I think the first thing that I kind of want to ask you here is going off those CBL awards that came out just recently. You know, looking at that full list, what kind of stood out to you the most? I know as a Winnipeg guy, you probably had some eyes on that big Teddy Allen conversation, but, you know, where were you on that?
I think personally, Teddy Allen was my MVP. You know, we went over it on our podcast, and I put out my votes. I had Teddy as my number one, and I had Myles Powell as my number two, and I had Tavian Dunmartin as my number three. The Tavian Dunmartin one, again, the way the point system works, it's a point system, so it's more points for the first, second, third. I didn't think Tavian Dunmartin was going to get many votes, so I just wanted to kind of put one out there as kind of a note of just how important he was for a Saskatoon team that absolutely was peaking at the right time until they got to the playoffs. But when it came to the Teddy Allen and Myles Powell, listen, they're both deserving. You know, I knew it could go either way, and it just really depends on what you value. A lot of people do value the fact that he was the best player on the best team in the regular season, which is when these votes are happening, right? The playoffs do not play a factor in the voting. But I thought the numbers that Teddy Allen put up, and people tend to forget that I think there was a little recency bias. He didn't play great in the last 3 games, but he was the driver of the Winnipeg team that put him in a position to fight for first place going down the wire in the West. He set an all-time record in points in a game. We'd never seen 50 points scored in a game, and he had 54. That was really special. The all-time leading scorer in a single season. I mean, it was hard for me to see the records that he broke. His numbers were better than they were in 2023. He was a top 10 rebounder, top 3 in steals. I mean, just a complete game. And, my thing with Teddy Allen is, I've had a chance to watch him not only here in the CEBL, but when he was playing overseas and in the G League. I think it's time we got to end. I know his name's Teddy Buckets, and that comes with a negative connotation everywhere else in the game. But, this year he was Teddy Efficiency. And I think we have to drop the narrative that he's only a scorer. He is an elite defender, especially when it's guarding the perimeter. And I thought a lot of it might have been overlooked. Myles Powell was incredibly important for the Scarborough Shooting Stars. Yes, he led the league in target score winners. He led a lot of comebacks in target score time. But that's about where it ends in terms of the comparisons. And even then, Teddy was scoring more on average than Myles Powell was. Myles Powell also got suspended in a few big games and dodged a suspension into the playoffs. That, when I'm looking at a most valuable player, the value's when you're on the floor. Teddy occupied more minutes, shot at a higher clip, stayed healthy, stayed out of suspension trouble up until, the playoffs. But, in the regular season, as we're saying, I thought, Teddy was the guy for me in terms of value. It wasn't at one end of the floor, and I thought he should have won. But again, Myles Powell is deserving. It just really depends on how you're looking at the criteria to vote for it.
100%.
Joey, I guess flipping it on to the other side now, Scarborough Shooting Stars, they collected 5 individual awards this season. Was this an accurate reflection of their season, or do you think as an official out there watching the game that another club was snubbed?
No, I mean, when you have that many records, man, like the accolades are going to come in. Kellen Tynes was my number 2 for Defensive Player of the Year, and I really struggled of whether or not I was going to put him in number 1. He was blocking shots, he was creating steals, and there's other areas that guy pops up where that won't show up on the stat sheet, but it disrupts offenses. Alex Fudge was just more exciting. He was also a really great defender and a great athlete. I had him as my number 1, but I was happy with either of those. Tyrell Vernon, the head coach of the Scarborough Shooting Stars. The Scarborough Shooting Stars are a team that play with their hearts on their sleeve, and that's an understatement. And when you have teams like that, it's important to have an anchor and, a coach that is poised. If you ever listen to him in an interview, it's almost like he doesn't reflect what the Scarborough Shooting Stars identity was. And they had the clearest identity all season in terms of what they were and what they were buying into. But he was always calm, cool, collected, articulate in interviews. And you need that, because if your coach starts going over, what we saw in Brampton could have been a lot worse, and it could have happened a lot earlier in the season. He had to manage some big time personalities and get these guys playing, making sure that Myles in a situation where he can score, talking to a guy like Frank Mitchell to come off the bench, who was undoubtedly the sixth man of the year and should have been the Canadian of the year. That's a guy that, but that comes down to Tyrell Vernon. Mike Rainbow did a great job in Winnipeg. If the Calgary Surge had made the playoffs, I would have voted for Dave DeViro. I think from a coaching standpoint, no one did a better job in the second half of the season than Dave DeViro. But man, Tyrell Vernon was from start to finish. They got the record. You got to give it to him there. And, looking at the Canadian, Tyrese Samuel's a great player. I thought it was a reputation pick. I didn't think he played as good as he did last year. I didn't even think he was the best Canadian on his team. I thought Shamar Givens was the better Canadian on Vancouver and played a bigger value role. He was a guy coming off the bench at the start of the year. Could have been sixth man as well. And then he was starting and then was the motor of that offense. And when you get to watch him play live and you see his quickness and how elite of a defender he is. We were talking about Teddy Allen. I think if this guy's getting more playing time throughout the year, he's probably threatening for that as well. So, the Tyrese Samuel, it's great for him. He's a great basketball player. I just thought his year wasn't Canadian Player of the Year good. But also, he is a guy that comes with a big reputation and is a very important part of that Vancouver team. But, it's not like I'm throwing my hands in the air like this is crazy, but I just thought there were other players that probably deserved a better look.
Yeah. Before we kind of move on to the next question, I just kind of have a follow-up because I'm in agreement with pretty much, every take you're saying there. And one of the things that I said this past week was that I thought TDM was pretty close to getting a first team nod. And in my opinion, do you think there was any snubs on those teams, or do you think they got it pretty right?
It's so tough. I thought so, but I had no issue. And, based on the fact that he was top of the second team means he was on the cusp of first team. It's so hard because Javonte Smart is one of the best players in this league. And I find, just because he plays in Ottawa, for whatever reason, he's often overlooked. We don't really talk about Javonte Smart as much as we probably should. But he is a guy that's been elite in this league. I kind of put him in that kind of conversation of the Khalil Ahmads, not saying that they're comparable. Khalil Ahmad is one of the best players to ever play in the CEBL, but he's that caliber, right? So him being there, I thought was awesome because he's never really in the MVP conversation, and he probably should be, especially when you look at a team like Ottawa when he came in, how much better they got. But yeah, it's really tough, man. TDM is my favorite player in the league, and I've said this openly many times. He's just so entertaining. He could do so much, and I've never seen a guy at that size use his size to his advantage so well. Listen, man, I've talked to Jalen Harris, who's played in the NBA, right, with the Toronto Raptors and has played top leagues all over the place. And after last year when they played Montreal, he said that was one of the toughest things he's ever had to guard. A guy that can, finds all the spots. Xavier Moon said the same thing. He's a dude that can find all those spots other guys can't get to, right? Because he can get under you, essentially. And how he uses his body to finish around the rim is phenomenal. Listen, Armani Chaney's great too, but, Armani Chaney's great when he's hitting shots. He's a guy that can often get bullied inside when he goes inside. Tavian Dunn-Martin rarely gets blocked, and he's 5'8", right? He went in, there was a game where he went up against Jeremiah Tillman Jr., who's 7 feet tall, and put in a layup on him. That is, to me, he's so impressive to watch. Obviously it's not easy at 5'8", and I don't know if I don't think he's going to be in the NBA or anything like that, but he's such an elite player and he's so fun to watch that I just, after the last couple of years seeing him play and how Saskatoon turned it around and, hearing the respect he gets from his head coach, Isaiah Fox and, Jamie Campbell, the assistant coach, who's also the head coach at the University of Saskatchewan, they had nothing but praise and had nothing to do with him being on the floor. It had to do with his leadership. And I think those are the things, because you play in a smaller market like Saskatoon, doesn't get as much coverage. I think those stories often go untold. So I'm not surprised. I don't think he was snubbed. I think he's a well-deserving second-team All-Star. And if he got into the first team, I just don't know who he would replace.
Yeah, I think that's definitely fair too. Obviously, there's a lot of things you could debate about, and I think that's something we talked about, Brady. I think we talked about Javonte Smart and he didn't get enough love. I think if I remember correctly, he had the second most points in the league this season. And obviously, again, if Teddy Allen, isn't in this league, maybe Javonte Smart gets that MVP vote. You never know. But talking about the MVP race just for a little bit here, obviously, Joey, you're hitting all the marks of what me and Brady have talked about too. I was a big Teddy Allen supporter. I thought, being able to, you look at what went into his season about being able to play 24 games and, broke the record with 4 left, and to be able to say, okay, not being able to rest the guy and be able to put up 27-ish points a game, there's a really lot of things that went right in his way to be able to say this actually got through. I watched Sean East II last year do it, and I thought, man, this isn't getting broken for a while. I thought, just the circumstances that have to get right. Obviously, there's so many things that are going to have to go right for the next person to break it. I was on the Teddy train, man. I was on the Teddy train, and I thought, you can't ask for much more from a guy because it is, in my opinion, more of an individual award than it is a team-based award. And I think we're hitting all the same things. I 100% agree with you.
So and like Teddy's off the court too. I mean, he's grown a lot since he was here in 2023. And like, I know I'm out of Winnipeg and I work for Winnipeg, but that doesn't go into it. The only thing that the bias that would come out is I see him play live every day, and see him at practice. So I do have, an angle that most people don't get to see. But, it was such a good story, and, it's just too bad the way it ended. But I think Teddy did a wonderful job at recreating certain narratives that have followed him. Some unfair, some maybe more fair. But I thought this year, just all around, he was the better player, and it was hard to not think he deserved that MVP.
Yeah. So do you think that people voting on the MVP kind of take it more of from a team approach? Like, you think, again, being on the best team, do you think a lot of people gravitate towards that? Like, me and Brady have talked a lot about MVP versus best player in that season. I think there's a difference between the two, and I know that's a big debate any league you go into. Do you feel like kind of where the sense is around the league and the people that vote on this, that it's more of, more what they mean to the team versus maybe who has the best individual statistics?
Yeah, I mean, that at the end of the day, I know the conversation, what you're putting out there makes a lot of sense, and I agree with it. But it is just the best player, right? But it's still funny because at the end of the day, what is your definition of the best player? Everybody has a different idea of that. And I think for a lot of voters too, I mean, you got to think, if you're in the East, you've got 4 teams in Ontario. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing a lot of Myles Powell. You're seeing a lot of Frank Mitchell. You're not seeing a lot of the guys from the West. And vice versa. Like, Scarborough didn't come to Winnipeg. I didn't see Myles Powell play live this year. But there's definitely a sense of, again, that's where you have to be as, what's the word I'm looking for here? As objective as possible when you're looking at it, because it's tough. Because yes, I do see that. I try to take that out of the way, and I try to go with the numbers, but also what doesn't pop up in the numbers. Like, I watch every CEBL game, and I'm trying to find those things that don't necessarily pop up because I don't want it to be just stat based, right? Like, that's what I say about Shamar Givens. Like, yeah, he has a bunch of steals towards the end of the year, but it's how he disrupts the offense when they're coming down, knowing where he is, knowing that he can shoot the gap, and also how he can cut off lanes that appear like they're there. Like, his quickness is so valuable to the Vancouver Bandits that but it doesn't always pop up on the score sheet. And everybody has the right to their opinion. Like, that's the other thing too. Like, that's what makes this so fun. I'll admit, I was shocked. I thought, just kind of the vibe I was getting from people that I know that have votes. I thought, okay, I think Teddy's going to get it. I think it'll be a close race. But when it was announced Myles Powell, I was kind of not, how do I put it? Not surprised because he deserved it, but a little shocked. I was kind of expecting it to be Teddy.
Yeah. All right, yeah, I mean, I think we kind of hit all the spots there on the awards. Let's transition. I want to talk about the championship series, game, whatever you want to call it. It came from that 3-game to 1-game. How did your kind of prep go for that, and how did, everything change in your eyes?
I've never seen anything like that. I was out in Brampton for game 1. I felt bad for the organization, to be totally honest. I mean, they were getting a record amount of people in there. They had a record amount of first-time ticket buyers. There were a ton of people from Winnipeg there. I met a guy from Kingston who came over to introduce himself because he watches the Target Score podcast, and it was kind of fun. I'm sitting out there because I'm like, we do a lot in the West, and Winnipeg, I get to see a lot of fans. Even when I go out west, to Vancouver, I've met a few. But in the East, we don't really cover the East that much. We have the Brampton show, but that's about it, right? So I was really excited. I'm like, wow, there is growth out here. There's people that are making the trip to Brampton to watch the finals. This is huge. Worst possible scenario. I mean, no one could have guessed it. We were sitting there. Everything seemed normal. There was a buzz. And then, I remember they were dragging this. It was like a big mop, but it's almost like a plow. They pull it backwards and whatever, and it takes up a big amount of space on the floor. And then the last time I saw that, I'm like, it didn't hit me till later. I'm like, oh man, I should have saw that coming, because that's what happened in Montreal in the outdoor game when it started raining and they were trying to get the extra moisture off the floor. It was an unfortunate situation. I definitely had some concerns with it, the way that it was handled. Again, I keep saying, from what I understand, this is not the team. The team didn't want ice put in. This was a mandate from the city and from the CAA Center that they needed it for their hockey day in Brampton, which was a week later. I digress on that, but with the humidity, it was a perfect storm. It was hot out there, it was raining, and it was humid. And it was all just a disaster to happen. So, this very well could have gone away with nothing. Like, Winnipeg's played on ice before, right? Like, when the Jets are in the playoffs. So it's not like this is something that's like completely out of the ordinary, but I just don't think they were prepared for it. And it was one of those things where, why would you do it if you don't absolutely need to do it? So, lessons learned. I also think, looking at the finals format, the weird part is if it went to game 3, and you guys would know this because you guys have a podcast, how do you break it down? How do you dig into the storylines? Because the game would have ended, like 4 o'clock-ish Central Time, and it would have started 2:30 the next day Central Time. Like, so you wouldn't even really had enough time to, like, break down what happened and look ahead to what needs to change. Like, it's just, I'd be getting ready for my next game. I don't even know if I'd have anything other than a post-game show. So there's, I think we can look at it, and Taylor Allen, my co-host on Target Score Winnipeg, and I got into a heated discussion about it. Like, do you go back to neutral site? Do you just have the finals the next 3 years in Winnipeg until the league grows a little bit more where you're going to get some fan support? Or do you just go to a final? Just like you've done all the rest of the time, like a one and done. The series is great. I just don't know if the league is in a position to have it done properly. And I'll tell you, man, as much as it was negative, I don't think I've done as many news hits as I did, the days after that game 1, especially in Winnipeg. And, as soon as Saturday came around and that game happened in Winnipeg, it totally overtook game 1. No one cared. No one talked about it. And then it was just how great it was to have a do or die game. 12,500 people were there. It was the NBA. And
yeah,
the Sea Bears games feel like that on any day. I didn't know there was another level until I was there, and it did not. Like, I watched the replay, and I'm like, it doesn't even show on TV like how loud that was. I couldn't hear my producer in my ear. Like, I'm doing the trophy presentation, and I think he's telling me stuff, and I have no idea what's going on. But it was such an awesome atmosphere to be a part of. It was exactly what the league needed. But with that said, and I've been a little bit critical. There's a lot this offseason that they have to go through. I think there could have been a little bit more accountability from the league as opposed to putting out a statement and saying we stand by it. Like, in years past, there was a commissioner who would come out and talk about this. Like, I look back at the Montreal game, they stretched that broadcast. It was Chuck Swirsky and Amy Odebear, and I can't remember, it might have been Heather Morrison. I can't remember who the sideline reporter was, but they're out there. They stretch the time. They're trying to give updates live in the moment to people that are watching. The commissioner comes out, explains what happens, basically says along the lines of, disappointing, but this was awesome. We're going to learn from this and move forward. You can still be mad, but at least like the league's coming out and being like, yeah, this is telling you what you saw in the statement, but you're seeing a face to it and that there's a person behind it and that we're actually actively doing this. I think that's the one thing, is having someone who's comfortable being the face of the league for stuff like that. Again, this wasn't like a legal thing or an investigation. It was simply a game got canceled, and it just would have been nice to not have CBC go to Murdoch Mysteries out of nowhere and TSN put on the best of whatever show without any explanation as to why they're going to that and never going back to explain it. These are things that the league had already built up to, and it's kind of the expectation. So there's certain things where it's not the end of the world, but it's one of those things that now we have to go into the offseason and be like, a lot of things went wrong here. We got caught a couple times, I think, with our pants down a bit, and we got to figure out that, when suspensions happen, when fights happen, how are we going to address this in a way that's accountable, that fans can see, and it's not being swept under the rug? I don't think there was an intention for that, but it's at a point now, and listen, I'm not a big betting guy. I don't like to push that, but if you're going to have that kind of, money behind it, well, there needs to be transparency that, people need to know that lineups are going to be affected by a suspension. At least let us know that they're fined. I don't even care if you tell me how much. I just need to know that there was a penalty for what happened and what exactly they were being penalized for. Like, even with that suspension in Brampton and Scarborough, it's just like suspended. Well, for what? Because then everybody asked why Myles Powell didn't get suspended when it appears on video that he had punched somebody, right? But he only gets a fine, even though he was suspended earlier in the year for bumping a ref, and there was no statement about that either. So, there's things like that where I think the league has to take a good hard look at just the organizational part of the basketball operations. But I think in a weird way, if I'm going to bring a silver lining into this, everything happened at once. This season was not a Band-Aid being ripped off. It was gauze after, major surgery. Like, it hurts like hell and it looks really bad, but the air's getting there and it's starting to heal. And I think that's what this was this year. Instead of this happening year after year, you kind of saw all of the foundation that needs to be fixed before you start building the rest of the house.
That's kind of a trend that we notice as well too, Joey. It seems like this league is always fast moving. There's always something going on, and still speaking with the best of three. Is this something that maybe we see due to the fact that it was campaigned throughout this whole season? Do we see this implemented into next season? And also a second question, just as a quick follow-up, do we see maybe the potential of a best on three in our first rounds?
I don't think so. It's really hard to keep players. And that's where I say where the league is right now. Like, the money is good. It's just, if you're making decent money in the summer, but someone's going to offer you six figures for a longer season, and they're saying, well, if you don't show up to training camp, well, we're going to rescind that contract and give it to the next guy. It could be a little scary. And I don't know what the answer is. That's way above my head with FIBA stuff. Like, how do they get it to a point where, teams are more complimentary to releasing their players to the CEBL and allowing them to finish their season in the CEBL if they're in the finals or, in the playoffs. I think the intention is to stay with the finals. But again, anything can happen over the off season. But again, like, even the finals, like, if they extend the season, which I've heard as well, they might be starting the season much earlier, right? And trying to keep the games in the second half of the week as opposed to having them all over the place, which I don't think is a terrible idea. But again, the longer the season, the more issues you have. I mean, if you look at a CEBL roster, there's really like three phases to it, right? There's your opening phase, which is basically, some guys might stay the whole season, but you're just trying to get the best players that are available, that are trying to get their work in or trying to get their tape so they can go to another CEBL team. Like, Armani Chaney was that guy. I think we all kind of had an idea that he wasn't going to be here long term just based on, Xavier Moon coming and the amount of imports they already had. But that guy played really well in Winnipeg, and then he goes to Calgary and becomes like a force. And, I'd make the argument that if he was there all year, it might be a different season in Calgary, right? If they didn't have to go through the coaching change and the personnel change. Because a lot of the guys that were on the team in the second half of the season weren't there for all the losses. So it must have been a weird feeling in Calgary. But anyway, I digress. But that's what the first part of the season's for. Is who do we have that might surprise us, that's just here to kind of hold us over, get us some wins before they go to their G League or NBA or overseas or whatever. And then in the middle part is where you start seeing, okay, now we're building the team for the second half. Like, what do we need after our start? How do we make the adjustments? And then you hope you hold as many as those guys as you can into the third phase, which is into playoffs. And that's usually where you'll see like the last big signing. Like, someone's like, you know what? I am going to finish the summer. I'll play 5 games, make a few $1,000 and try to win a championship, right? So it's just always going to be tough. And I think that's where Winnipeg fans are just starting to understand this. And I think the championship helps a lot, where now it's not so much about the players on the team as much as we want our stars. We want them to represent us, our team, and we will make them stars. We want them to stay. But at the end of the day, like, they don't make the team. And I think that was a big turning point for Winnipeg this year, where it's like, we'll welcome anybody. Winnipeg celebrates their stars like no other. If you ever go to a game, you will see jerseys with guys' last names who've played partial seasons, full seasons. Like, when they buy in, they buy in. But this year, the big one is like, well, where are the stars going? Especially when Jeremiah Tillman Jr. and Emmanuel Acott left right after the Teddy incident. People were like, wow, this is crazy. Playoffs just starting. I'm wasting my money. Well, I think a lot of people had to eat crud after that because, they got an unbelievable playoff run with a team that I always said would have been very exciting had they not had the other players. Like, the end of the season team, if we announced that as if that was part of the announcement of the starting roster, people would have been, wow, what a great team. This team's awesome. They're going to be tough. But because there was the Jeremiah Tillman Jr.'s and Emmanuel Acotts who left, it felt like major panic mode. And I think I was one of the few that, I didn't say that, they were still the favorite against Saskatoon, but I thought people were very much overvaluing Saskatoon going into that first round of the series, right? So I think, to get back on track, I think the way that it ended in Winnipeg this year is an indicator of like what the league actually is. They're all going to come for the team. You have to build that culture. They have to fit in, but don't be too upset that they left. The league doesn't offer enough money right now, and it does run at an awkward time. Unless they're G Leaguers, you're almost always going to have players coming in late and leaving early. So it's that's the tough part for coaches, where I think coaches deserve a lot more love in how they have to build their cultures, not just their teams.
Yeah, I think that's that's a lot of what you could probably say for like a lot of teams too. There's guys that come through and you're like, wow, are we going to build around this guy? Coming from Edmonton, Dane Danger felt like that guy. And there's times where I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, how did this guy slip through the cracks? Like, how is he here? He felt like he was an NBA player. Maybe some GMs maybe agree with me there. I don't know. We'll see about that part. But, sticking with that final, I was telling some of the guys too off camera, like, that felt like so crazy to be able to think, 10 years ago, think before we even had a CEBL league like this, to think, okay, we're going to have a NBA playoff atmosphere in the middle of Winnipeg, a city, right, that many people think of just as a hockey town and a football town. I'm like, I was so it felt like the absolute moment where you could say basketball in Canada is really coast to coast, and it's in the heart of it, right, at the heart of the prairies, to think, the most people we've ever had at a CBL game go into that. It was really a unique situation, obviously, that led up to that, but it was just so interesting to feel it. I was telling the guys, it felt like an NBA playoff game, and I don't know if we've ever had that feeling before. It just felt like everything was so amazing, all the cinematics, watching it at home. I felt like, wow, this is what the league needs more of. But getting to that game, you were there. You said it. It was loud, all that stuff. I was watching that. I was at the Elks game. Funny enough, they were playing the Toronto Argonauts, so I had to watch it halfway on my screen. But man, it looked like Brampton came out and they looked like they were going to be really great. Obviously, Winnipeg just kind of took over and never let up. I want to get your thoughts. What did you think was really the biggest swing in that championship game? How much do you think the crowd played a factor into that? And, how sweet was it, do you think, for Winnipeg to be able to win it on home court?
It was big. I mean, for the league, and the league will admit it too, and I don't think it's a bias thing. It's just, it is the strongest market. Going to what you were saying about the NBA feel, I've talked to guys who have played many games in the NBA and have been to almost all of the stadiums, and all of them have said that Winnipeg is uncomparable to what you see out there, with the exception of a few, right? The Madison Square Gardens when the Knicks are good, I was going to say Boston Garden, TD Garden when the Celtics are good. There's certain markets in the NBA that are always, rabid fan bases and engaged, but, even when it's only 6,000 people, it is loud. Everybody is into it. And the target score time part of it, everybody's on their feet for the whole last part of the game, even when they're up by 20 or 25, because, that's where I think the magic of target score kind of kicks in. But this game here with the 12,500, the team wasn't confident they would even hit five figures. It was a struggle, but Winnipeg is a bit of a last minute town. And then all of a sudden it was we're hitting 10,000. And it was we're going to set the record. And that was all on the day of, right? People were just getting FOMO and it's I got to go to this. I can't miss this. Right. But the crowd definitely played a factor. I think it was a little negative at first in terms of, I think guys were a little too tight, I say, Osborne was missing layups. It was just out of character stuff that we were seeing. But once they got into their rhythm a little bit, and started working the crowd in their favor. I don't like to give too much credit to the crowd, but it is something special. Even coaches have said the same thing. It's the mecca of the CEBL. I've been to a lot of the venues, and there's just nothing like it. Jelani Watson-Gale was also a massive reason why. 17 points in the first half is the only reason why they were still in the game in the first place. If he's not there, because no one was hitting shots for a while. And then obviously Simon Hildebrandt having the game he had. And, to me, that was kind of the game where he went from the golden boy to Mr. Manitoba, boy to man kind of thing, to use some Winnipeg terms. But he was a guy that, it was exactly what I think the league needed. It was natural. It came authentically, and I think it really reflected what this league is meant to be. A development league for Canadians like Simon Hildebrandt, who was a standout at the University of Manitoba, used that U Sports development role to up his game, became a household name at 19 years old in his hometown, and only got better. It led to better opportunities in the U.S. He got better playing in the NCAA, where he fine-tuned parts of his game, and then he put it all together in this game where the dependable guy on that was not. And it wasn't a shot by a random guy who put up his only 2 points in the game, happened to be the winner. No, he was at 24 points or whatever he had that game. And he's the guy that hit the winner at home because of the opportunity that this league has. Listen, there's been conversations. I'm not sure if you've seen the Oren Weisfeld article he put out on TVO, pointing out that the American creep is happening, right? Like 53% are Americans. There's been more imports added this year, and there's been talk that they might take away the Canadian rule, right? The CFL succeeded. They've tried some of the stuff that I think is being floated out there that didn't work, and I know it's a bit apples to oranges, but there are certain things that from a Canadian sports market we know from experience don't work. So I think they got to look at that part, and I think the 2 Canadians on the floor is a great rule. I think the imports should be no more than what it is now. I'm okay with it, because the other thing that you risk is watering down the American talent, where now you're getting like 7th, 8th, 9th guys off the bench from the G League coming in that, just aren't going to deliver the same value that a Canadian that we see play in our U Sports or, CCAA programs, having that opportunity to build their name. But to get back to the base of the question, the biggest thing was Jelani's first half. Simon Hildebrandt filling in that role of just, being able to get those rebounds. He took a beating that game, man. Like, absolute beating. He was getting married like 3 days later. All I was hoping, like, don't get a black eye, dude. Like, just keep it together. He's had a rough season with that physical part of his game, but still being able to shoot and hit the big shot. And obviously, goes without saying, Xavier Moon. He's the best player to ever play in this league. It's not even close. And that's no disrespect to anybody like Khalil Ahmad, who's also been phenomenal for so many years. I wasn't sure what to expect, because I was there the first year. I was working for CTV Edmonton, and I remember going to a Stingers game and it being cool. I was like, this is fun. Like, I really hope it catches on. And seeing him play there and how good he was then. And I'm thinking, man, the league has changed a lot in the 5 years since he's played here. And he didn't miss a beat. And he was coming off an injury from last year too, right? He sees the game differently. The stuff that he does in terms of getting players engaged and finding those passing lanes that just most people wouldn't ever attempt. And it doesn't stick out. When someone takes a bad shot, like a Teddy Allen, like a quote bad shot, and they go in, you're like, oh, that's Teddy being Teddy. Like, there's passes that he made where I'm like, anybody else would not find this hole or make the decision quick enough, and it looks like a perfect pass. You're like, oh, textbook point guard. And it's like, no, man, like that is elite level stuff that he makes look easy, that most people wouldn't get off, and if they tried, it would be a turnover, it'd be in someone's feet or whatever the case may be. Xavier Moon, pardon the pun, was the X factor. I think he came in and proved exactly what he is, the best player to ever play in this league. He's our Michael Jordan, our Wayne Gretzky. I don't think it's debatable. He's the greatest of all time. He deserves all the accolades that he got, and he's been nothing but a positive influence on this league from the days he was here before to coming back after the break, and was a great ambassador for the city of Winnipeg too. Just a true pro. I was super impressed with him on and off the floor.
Yeah, well, you kind of mentioned all those guys, and it's really early, right? The season just finished, but, taking a look, what does this Sea Bears team have in store for 2020, or I guess it'd be 2027? Yeah, we're kind of pushing that barrier now, but, they had such a good core. McGowan's, you mentioned as well, Osborne, Moon, Allen, Hildebrandt, Tillman, like all these guys. What does it look like? Can they run this back? Can they keep this somewhat core together? What does that look like to you? I know it's going to be early to predict and hard to predict, but
it's tough to say too, right? Like, does Teddy Allen come back, right? And what does your team look like built around him? Does Xavier Moon come back? Like, I'm gonna say no. I interviewed him on the post game show and asked him straight up, and one of the things he said was he didn't get to play a full season in Russia, right? And then joined halfway through the season, and he obviously, with the whole FIBA clearance here, didn't get to play as much as he wanted here. But his whole thing was basically to get a full season under his belt, get back into conditioning, to get back to those top leagues. And I think that is exactly, he wanted to win a championship, but there was numerous reasons that also allowed him to play this year. So the team might look very different. Here's what I'll say. Mike Rainbow, I anticipate, will be back as the head coach and general manager. If he didn't, that would be his choice. He very much impressed ownership. David Asper, who did a wonderful job in replacing Mike Taylor. Love Mike Taylor. I thought he was a great coach. He was awesome to deal with the media, but just lost the magic here in Winnipeg, and the change was needed. I was impressed with Mike Rainbow's command on day one of training camp. I wasn't sure how he'd go from the University of Winnipeg Westman, young men, some kids, and then go into men that play for their lives. I wasn't sure. Not that I doubted, I just didn't know what the difference would be. And there wasn't. The respect that he commanded from those guys and the culture that he created. And if you see his U Sports record, it took years to get there. It wasn't always a powerhouse at the University of Winnipeg, but brick by brick, that guy's put together a culture that is predominantly made up of undersized, overlooked, and undervalued players. and he tends to get the most out of those teams. Like Sean Moran's a name in Winnipeg. Like, you mentioned that name. Heck, if you put a tag in this podcast, you'll probably see the Moranen bump where, the Filipino community love that guy. He's has records at the University of Winnipeg and really helped make them a national threat year after year. The dude was washing cars after high school. He had nowhere to play. And Mike Rainbow's like, hey, come out to one of our shoots here and, see what you can do. And he ended up becoming one of the greatest Winnipeg Westmen of all time. This is what he does. So this is where I'm not surprised, and it had nothing to do with the Sea Bears. It had to do with the coach. There was no panic when Jeremiah Tillman left and Emmanuel Acott. And genuinely, they only cared about Teddy's well-being when, with his incident. This is the teams that he builds that are deeper than you think, that put the players in positions to be their best. And he's not like a big rah-rah guy. Like, you never get the sense he's pretty laid back, pretty calm, cool, and collected. But he gives guys confidence by being confident in them, right? Whether it's, Ramogi Naguti playing 3 seconds, right? Like, he's going to call you when needed and he expects you to be ready. Or you're Teddy Allen, who he can talk to and say, listen, we can help you get better. I know you're great, but let's just focus on these other areas of your game that are going to make you better and can get the guys to buy in. There weren't a lot of dudes that had any bad things to say about Mike Rainbow. In fact, there wasn't one that I talked to that said anything bad. It was all positive, going out of their way to say how good of a coach he is. And I think it was another bright spot of just how important the U Sports level is. And I think for young basketball players, understanding that, hey, it might be the best case for my development to go to a school in Canada and still find my way to the pros, especially now as we're seeing these coaches step into the pro realm themselves. But I think for next year, it's really hard to say what players will be available. They've missed out on a lot of players in the past too, right? That got NBA contracts before they were able to come in the summer. Trey Scott, we thought would be back and he wasn't, then he was, so what's his situation going to be like next year? Because he was another very impactful player that just wasn't able to see the end of the season, and he wasn't happy about it, but he had to report to his team. So I trust that whatever is going to happen here between Mike Rainbow, Alex Campbell, who he gives a lot of credit to from the GM standpoint in recruiting, and Megan Newton, who also is an assistant general manager and helps on the basketball ops side, they got a little bit of an all-star team, it feels like, happening right now in the front office when it comes to the basketball operations side. And, I'm not sure. I'd hate to comment on it because I'm like, they might run it back with a whole new team that might be better than this one. I absolutely have no idea. But a guy like Alex Campbell, who is going to be the next great head coach in this league and in U Sports or beyond, I thought he just burst onto the scene as an assistant after his playing days. He's been an assistant for a few years at the University of Saskatchewan. But what he provides in player development, player relations, he's going to find a head coaching job in U Sports, and that program, I think, is going to fly wherever it is. He'll find his way eventually in the CEBL. But as this core is able to maintain itself, and I think it will at least for one more year, I'm excited to see what they put together because, this year was a team that, again, didn't run the table like Scarborough. They were 4-4 to start. All of those losses early in the season were by 1 possession or 2 possessions or less, and they got blown out once, maybe twice. It was a pretty consistent, progressive build that, the media made more of a big deal of the lows and the highs than they did, right? So I'm more curious to be like, are we going to get the announcement that they are extending them for another year? And then I'll be keeping an eye on all the leagues because you never know who they're going to pull out of where, and there's going to be a big contributor on the Sea Bears next season.
Joey, you kind of mentioned it, and I just want to, I guess, further allude to your words there. You mentioned the coaching, right? And that's the biggest part of why the fact we've been able to say that the Sea Bears have been the deepest team so far in this league. Is that something that you agree with? And do you think that we're headed into that same direction in 2027? Or do you think just with how the league is, how fast things change, could we just be looking at, a snap of a finger and the Surge could be on top next season?
Yes, that's always a thing. The Surge were awful this year for the start of the season, and it cost them the playoffs. They were in the Final Four every year since they moved from Guelph. And it's funny how quickly we react. Oh my God, this is awful. What a terrible team. And I'm thinking, man, if you told me if I bought a 5-year season ticket plan and 4 of the 5 years they would get to the Final Four and in the finals in some cases, and then have 1 year where they miss, I'd be all in as a fan, right? 100%. Edmonton's another team that has a championship pedigree. Jordan Baker, I always say never count out a Jordan Baker team. And even this year, they got into the playoffs, and I was not going to be surprised if Vancouver got knocked off by Edmonton. It's been a tough few years since he took over in terms of, they've won a few playoff games, but haven't really kind of got to the promised land yet. But again, that all can change. And it really depends, Jeremy, from like team to team. Like the Calgary Surge never bring back the same coach. And that's part of the plan. They don't plan on bringing back the same coach year after year. They want to bring in a new coach. They love the G League side of things and leading into the G League experience. So like a Dave DeViro, who knows if he even wants to coach anymore? Like here's a guy that, is getting at the point of his career where it's, is it getting to be too much? I know he loves coaching, but he's been open about it too, where it's like, I don't know, year after year what I'm going to do. He just had a great year at TMU winning the OUA championship. It really depends. I think the Winnipeg blueprint is they've always attempted continuity. And I think that was the hard part. They attempted it. The fans wanted it, but it's a lot out of your control. And I think teams, especially the newer teams, are figuring out, the ebbs and flows of it. Control what I can and understand that there's going to be parts that I can't control. I think the coaching staff, teams are going to start figuring out, are going to be the ones that might be a little bit more controllable. But it's still tough. Like an Isaiah Fox, who, again, that was his first head coaching job. Alex Serta, his first head coaching job. These guys are going to go on to bigger and better things. That's the development part for the coaches. But now it's going to be a tougher decision because we saw a lot of successful U Sport coaches. Probably none more than Tyrell Vernon, who's at St. FX, Mike Rainbow at the University of Winnipeg, and even Coach DeViro, who, was fresh off a conference championship himself. They're going to be easier to hold long term. They understand the Canadian game a little bit better, right? And I thought the other thing, too, that I noticed with Mike Rainbow was like that first practice explaining the ball off the rim rule in FIBA, which is different from the G League, and making sure everybody understood that and what they can do once the shot goes up. I think there might be, if you see, I'm not going to say it yet, but there's going to be a trend in the next 3 years. If you see Mike Rainbow win another one or Tyrell Vernon win another one and or another U Sports coach that might get an opportunity that we don't even foresee coming yet, there might be, basketball operations around the league looking at it saying, maybe we don't need the next up-and-coming NBA guy or, G League darling. Like maybe, it's kind of trying to catch lightning in a bottle where we might be able to create our own storm in a jar, if that makes sense, right? Where it's like, okay, we've got the elements, like let them cook and see what we can build up here, and they can build the relationships. It might help in bringing players back, right? If they know they're going to play with a coach that they liked or a franchise that they liked, like Teddy Allen, I don't think was ever planning on coming back to Winnipeg until Mike Rainbow got that job because they had a great relationship when he was an assistant here with the Sea Bears when Mike Taylor was head coaching. So it's going to be interesting to see the trends. Again, the league is only 8 going on 9. I think we're starting to see some trends. Things are moving quickly. Who knows what the league even looks like next year? So, going back to what this team might look like, well, it really depends on what the rules are, right? Because if you're going to go give me more American players or more money to spend, then yeah, I'm probably going to step away from the Simon Hildebrands or whatever to get whoever that is that's, on the cusp of the NBA. Does that player even exist? Sometimes we talk ourselves into that, right? Just because a guy's Canadian or went through U Sports doesn't mean he can't play with the best of them. That's why I absolutely love how that game ended, regardless of it being Winnipeg. Just a Canadian guy who went up, who's just starting his pro career and was like, I am elite without saying it. Like he showed it, right? So it'll be interesting to see how the league kind of positions itself going into the next year. But I think the coaching, again, the other part of this from a marketing standpoint, coaches in the CEBL could be a lot like coaches in college football or college basketball, where the players come and go. Like that's just the nature of those leagues. So they pay more for the coaches because they become the celebrities in the face of the team, right? I think you might see more of that in the CEBL, where it's like, hey, at the end of the day, we can't promise you that Teddy Allen or Xavier Moon's going to come back, but we can promise you that you got Mike Rainbow here for the next 4 or 5 years or whatever, right? So you might see a little bit more of that where it's like, okay, we've got a coach that the city buys into, and let's be real, Mike Rainbow's coaches in Winnipeg. He lives here. He's from Brandon. Jeremy Wallinga, his assistant, was also from Brandon. Alarian Bonham played at the University of Manitoba and Brandon, now coaches the women's team in Brandon, right? Alex Campbell at the U of S, but had played for the Sea Bears. That was a completely homegrown staff that they have. Stephen Wesley, the other assistant, an assistant with Rainbow at the University of Winnipeg. So it was a completely local coaching staff that these people know. And, their kids go to their camps. They go to the U Sports games, the Canada West Conference games to watch these guys. So I think there's also a marketing opportunity that like they're the people that are here all the time. They're the ones out in the community, shaking hands, putting on camps, promoting, their programs as well as the Sea Bears. I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think more programs are going to see that, particularly in the prairies. And, in Western Canada, actually, I should say, like, I think in BC too, they've got pretty strong support, but Western Canada is a different sports market than Eastern Canada. And I think we spend way too much time trying to fix the Eastern Canadian markets. Like, it's different out here. Like, it's weird to tell people that, no, like the Sea Bears are a real part of our sports culture and fabric out here. They're not just this novelty team. Like, people are pissed when players leave. They are pissed when they lose. And if they would have lost that game, it would have been a long off season of this team having to answer to their fans. And I think we need to lean into that more in order for other markets to understand. It's the same in the CFL, right? The Bombers, the Riders, even the Elks, as much as the attendance sucked, they're still being talked about. Right. So even when things aren't going well, like it dominates the conversation out in Edmonton and same in Calgary. So, it's one of those things where it's like maybe we focus on that a little bit more and expose that. Like I said earlier, maybe you do have the finals for another year or two in Winnipeg, regardless of who's in the finals, just because you're going to get at least, 5,000-6,000 fans without much effort. And then, if the Sea Bears get in, well, obviously it's going to be 12, maybe 15,000 because now people can plan for it, as opposed to like, I don't know who's going to be in the finals. I don't know when the game's going to be. So I think there's a part of it, like you got to cater to the fans a little bit, give them time to plan for this stuff. If you really want them to buy in, they need to have some sort of ability to be like, you know what, I'm going to go to the finals in that city. That's what I liked about Championship Weekend. It was like a bit of a festival. You can go in there. You knew the game was happening on that day, regardless of who was there. You can book your tickets. All is good. Believe me, when the game happened in Vancouver after they beat Saskatoon, I tried to get out to Vancouver, and the cheapest flight I can find was well over $2,000, right? Like, it's just not feasible for most Canadians to say, like, I'm going to fly out there, get a hotel, get the tickets, and it be, like something that they can do. So I think that's another part. It's just like, we got to stretch it out in a way that if you really want these to be marquee events, you got to build it in a way people can get there.
I think that's really interesting too. You hit on a lot of things. One of the things that really was interesting too this year was like, obviously being in Edmonton, I remember there was a lot of buildup, right? Of like Xavier Moon was at a few games in Edmonton last year, and it felt like, okay, if there was going to be a time when you'd think it was going to be the Stingers, right? That Moon was going to be able to get to here. One of the things, like you're talking again about, like, Mike being there and just it was a real organizational shift from 2025 to 2026 for the Sea Bears. Like, I'm interested from your perspective if there was kind of like a vibe from ownership that they wanted to go out and really make a change, right? Because they're kind of like a newer team. Was there really a motive this year to say, okay, we want to go out, we want to establish ourselves? Because being able to go after the best player in CBL history, like, you got to be really determined to do that. I'm interested if you kind of had an inclination before the season that was something they wanted to do.
Well, I'll say that David Asper was very clear. I can't remember the quote exactly, but it was something poetic where he's like, we wanted that prairie dirt and whatever grit and, really saying like we need homegrown, which is why he went with Mike Rainbow as the head coach. Alex Campbell has ties to the entire league, but, he played his last years in Winnipeg and, is now an assistant coach. You got the vibe that they were going to do something big. Because it kind of felt like with Mike Taylor, a lot of players I think didn't want to come back because Mike Taylor was the head coach, right? Again, like nothing against Mike Taylor, but there were players that were upset with their roles and things like that. And I think they thought, well, I'm not coming back to sit the bench kind of thing. So you knew that there was going to be some big changes. And then when they got Xavier Moon, I thought, of course they got Xavier Moon because, again, Alex Campbell knows him really well from their playing days. There's a lot of respect there. And it's the biggest market. Like, here's a guy who truly cares about the CEBL. One of the few Americans that come in here with, a long standing. There are some, but they're not very many that don't come here for more than a cup of coffee and forget it ever happened. Here's a guy who's built his legacy in this league. Like, he went on to the NBA, but it's still not going to be anywhere near as impactful as what he did in the CEBL. So when he came here, I'm like, it makes total sense. You get to play in that NBA arena, experience how much it's grown. And if you can take this market to the next level, it's only going to do well for the league. And that trophy that is an X for the MVP in his honor, for a guy like that, that's your legacy. You want to do whatever you can to help this league move forward so that never leaves, right? So I think I wasn't totally shocked. And then when they had Teddy Allen, I'm like, man, like this is wild. Like this is going to be a big year. But again, you never know. Like, it wasn't fireworks right off the hop. Xavier Moon didn't show up until, a little later into the season. Then he wasn't able to play. Like, this could have been a totally different season. This could have been a team, had they had the original one from the start, that might have had 22 wins. Like, like it looked really good on paper. So yeah, I knew they were going to do something. I shouldn't say I knew. I had a feeling they wanted to do something big. I know the respect that a guy like Alex Campbell has around the league. And there's a lot to offer outside of money in Winnipeg, right? Like these guys are legitimate stars here. Like they go out in town, they know their names. They're, taking pictures and autographs. Like you kind of get to live that big, like the star life essentially that they don't get to live. Like even though they're getting paid in other countries, they might not get it in those markets. So I don't think it's taken for granted. Like a guy like Teddy Allen will tell you time and again how special it is to play in Winnipeg. Like he's the Xavier Moon of Winnipeg, right? Even though Xavier Moon played here, like he will forever be a legend in this. And we'll always talk about the Teddy Allen era, like the good and the bad. But he's left an impact on here that is now in Winnipeg sports lore, not just Winnipeg Sea Bears history kind of thing. So I think he saw that. And I think he knew that if I'm going to leave Edmonton, where I've built a great reputation and, really the foundation of that team, it would have to be for an opportunity that would be better for the league and for me to win a championship. And I think it was a perfect storm in Winnipeg for him on that front.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked about it all on the Target Score podcast. But as we kind of wrap up here, I want to give you the chance to talk about that a little bit. But I've been watching a bunch of episodes this season, and one of my favorites was when you were chatting with Trey McGowan's and just like his entire story there. But I kind of want to ask you, like, what was your favorite interview moment this year from the Target Score?
Okay, I'm going to cheat a little bit, though, because it wasn't my weekly show. It was definitely the post game of the championship final that we live streamed that, and it looked way better than I anticipated, which was great. It was, kind of looked like the NBA on TNT panel, which was fun. And we had the Brampton boys here for that, doing a little collab show. And, but having like that one was good because you had Xavier Moon where now that was the least polished I've seen him in an interview. Like it was like that was him more speaking from the heart and getting a little more emotional. David Asper coming on, the owner and founder of the Winnipeg Sea Bears, and kind of opening up about what this win meant, and and even talking about, you guys said earlier, he's like, yeah, we'll enjoy this, but we got to look to 2027 now, right? Like we're a sports team, like it doesn't end. And I was just like, dude, take a second, like just enjoy this, man. Like this is great, right? And he did. But that one was definitely my favorite. But I think overall, this whole season had great characters. And this is no slight on last year's team, but I felt last year's team, you had that albatross of knowing you were going to be in championship weekend. You were in the conference finals. Every team has struggled with that outside of one in the history of like the championship weekend era. But there are a lot of dudes there, and this was Mike Taylor's thing, right? He got big names, and I think he kind of hoped they would mesh, and it never really felt like they did last year. It felt like a lot of guys that were there to collect their paychecks. This year felt like a team in Winnipeg that loved Winnipeg, that loved the Sea Bears, that didn't take it for granted, that had great character, like guys that would go out to the community and do the extra camps, spend the extra time with the kids, right? Taking the pictures, signing the basketballs and all this other stuff. It did seem more like the 2023 team, which is still, probably not, maybe not now, but was like the favorite team in Winnipeg just because they were that first that, really were kind of taken aback, didn't know what to expect, and was like, holy cow, like, we're playing in an NBA type environment and people love us out here. They got back to that this year, and they were more open with their stories, as you say, right? Like kind of sharing their background and why they're here. And, even like the Nate Balamus, like he didn't have the year he did last year, but you talk to that guy who started at Canadore College, right? Before he went to Lakehead, and never thought he would ever play pro. And then he became a role player for a really good team and had some great time here, but had to leave because, he needed the extra training before he goes overseas. There were a lot of those dudes. And I think, it's hard to narrow it down to one. I'm going to say it was that post game with the interviews with, and even DJ Burns, like, there was a lot, but I think it was just the openness of how these players were in that post game after like the job was complete. And just like the overall like aura of that, of just like being in the arena, confetti still all over the place, the quiet buzz after everybody, and you can still hear people in the hallways, like, in the concourse celebrating and things like that. That one would be good. But that's the greatest part about the whole Target Score thing, right? It started as a bit of a hobby. It's grown into a bit of a network now. And, it was only just to kind of give Winnipeg fans a little bit of more. We just didn't have it. I was a sports director at CTV for a long time, and I left it to pursue basketball because I saw that there was an opportunity here, and people were craving it, and that's kind of showed up in spades. So it started off as first guest was Chad Posthumous, right? That we had our first YouTube episode with a guest, and that's what set the tone. It was just everybody loved to hear from these guys because there wasn't really a platform for it, which is why I applaud you guys, right? Like we need the analysis, we need different voices, and this is, I always say, like, it's the CFL of basketball. That's the potential. That's the first ceiling. I don't know how far this goes, but this, giving people something to digest when they're not playing goes a long way at building the culture of basketball in general in this country. And like I said, seeing you guys pop up with the Canadian Fast Break, and there's a few others that have popped up, whether they're podcasts or independent reporters, cutting their teeth into this and treating it with the respect that, it deserves, because it does get mainstream media attention, just not as often. And then you become that, that trusted voice in that space, which is a very rewarding thing. In the past, I've never really had a beat. I was covering everything, and it was great. I enjoyed it, and I got exposed to a lot. But there's something when you can create a community of, a specific sport where everybody's kind of got the same love, right? We see it in football, we see it in hockey, and I think the CEBL is what delivers that in basketball. So yeah, the target score, there's so many guests that have come through, but that's the essence of what I love about it, is you get to in-depth talk to these guys. They get to show their personality, whether they want to or not. Not all interviews are home runs, right? Some are just reserved by nature, but others relish the opportunity to share their stories, because at the end of the day, it might be that interview that helps them, get that next job, because they're trying to judge the off-court stuff. How do they deal with a bigger media market? What is their story? What are they bringing to the table? So all of those things, help everyone, I think, myself included. So it's been really fun to have Target Score, which is now, just finishing its 4th year in Winnipeg, and then first years in Vancouver and in Brampton, which has been awesome too, to see the support out there.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I there's a lot to take in there, but I love how you kind of describe it as like characters. There's so many different, personalities, I think, especially on those Sea Bears this year. Like, you go from like DJ Burns, you look at him, and then you look at like Trey McGowan's. Like, it's a long, I feel like a long string of different guys, and they built such a culture there, I feel too, right? And taking away, like, that one stood out to me, the Trey McGowan's interview. It was like, if I'm not mistaken, like Teddy was a big part in him coming to Winnipeg as well, right?
Yeah,
like,
because they played with each other in Nebraska. Yeah,
so it's like, it's just such a culture they built, and everybody bought into it. And then even with Teddy now playing in the playoffs, like, it's just, they all came together to rally. It's a beautiful story, honestly. But
it was the next man up mentality to a T. Like, they that was another interview that I had done for the pregame show, where Trey McGowan says, like, we noticed the Saskatoon game, it wasn't as packed as we thought it was going to be, and we read the comments and we just laughed, because no one knew what we were, like, how deep this team is and how not panicked we were. We were all worried about Teddy, but we all have a job to do. We're all professionals, and we're all starters in our other teams. So everybody that stepped up, DJ Burns included. DJ Burns is probably I've never seen a guy with such high energy that's so positive. I think I've seen him like 2 negative, like, emotional reactions in an entire season, but they all complimented each other. They all accepted each other for who they were. The Teddy Allens included, the Xavier Moons, the Trey McGowans. They're all a little bit different. But the next day we saw them walking around the Forks as a team after they won the championship, and you could tell they were friends. Not all teams do that. They just have their night and then take off. And I think, and it may never be replicated again. That's the other thing. Like, something special happened in Winnipeg this year, and it wasn't right off the hop. It took some time. It took some ups and downs. Like, it was a perfect storyline season from a journalistic standpoint on their path to the playoffs. They weren't like the Super Cinderella, but it wasn't the powerhouse that just rolled through everybody either. And they had their fair share of adversity at the worst possible times and just overcame it like it wasn't there in the first place.
Yeah, I love it. I think, we've kind of pretty much touched all the bases here. Fellas, do you have anything else you want to ask Joey?
No, I'm good.
Oh yeah, thanks for sharing your insight, Joey. We always appreciate getting expertise in here. It's a different world for opinions, I guess, to get spread out there. So we always appreciate your insight and your words.
I appreciate you guys. Appreciate what you're doing. Keep it up. You're doing great work. And I know that it's not only basketball. You guys are doing football too. And it's tough to start up, but you guys have done a very professional job in doing it. And happy to come on anytime. And for your viewers out there that don't know about the Target Score podcast, it's on YouTube at Target Score Podcast. On Instagram at Target Score Pod. You can follow me at Joey Slattery TV on Instagram. And the podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. And we have a show in Winnipeg, a show in Brampton, show in Vancouver, and we'll be expanding in the next season into some other markets as well. So hopefully one day we'll have all the markets covered and everybody gets this kind of coverage for their teams.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm sure you've checked out Joey. And if you haven't, if you're watching us, you probably checked him out. But if you haven't, go give him a shout there. And, I think this is the part where we're going to thank you again for coming on. And then we're going to send it back to us at the to kind of wrap up this episode. But thanks again, Joey.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
All right, I must say that was a terrific interview with Joey Slattery. Once again, thank you to him for coming on the podcast. And if not, go check him out. Target Score, everything he's got going on there is just wonderful. So tremendous stuff. But as for us here, on the Canadian Fast Break, National Rundown, we're still kind of building towards a lot of stuff. Even though, the CEBL season is finished, we still want to get out some content on those 2 podcasts. So stay tuned, because this week we are going to be dropping at least the very first part of our season breakdowns going through each team. So stay tuned for those. You're not going to want to miss that. That'll be me, Jeremy, and Giano back at it once again, reviewing all that stuff. So, make sure you guys stay tuned, because we still got a lot coming on, a lot to go through. And, enjoy your week, but make sure you come back here where we're going to be breaking down everything. So once again, I've been your host, Brady Locke, joined alongside Gianni Olosio, Jeremy Russo, and of course, the great Joey Slattery. So we will see you all next week.